On today's episode, we're going to join Matt Cudde first, and he's going to talk about planting trees, timber stand improvement to create the habitat that he was hunting in last season, and then how he used the Cudde link system to put it all together and tag a really good buck. When we come back from that, I'll bring you up to speed on what I'm experimenting with during the off season.
My name is Matt Cudde, and it's early March here today, and my youngest son and I are really excited to do some shed hunting on this property here. But the last time we were here, we had two really awesome hunts here where I shot the split G3 and Caleb shot a buck that we called Big Six. But there were a couple different reasons why those hunts were incredibly successful, and I want to tell you about those here today. First of all, one of the key reasons that we felt the split G3 was living in this area was because in 1993, the landowner actually did a direct seeding to these areas. And you can see behind me, this is the fruit of those direct seedings. These trees have grown up to be about 40 feet tall. So the increase of habitat in this area was one of the major factors why that deer was living in this area. This is a key area that we focus on every single year because of these new tree plantings, and they just provide intense cover for these deer when they come in here and they want to find protection from predators and just seek refuge in general. Secondly, one of the things I was not aware of until after the hunt was that the landowner came in and did a bunch of TSI work last winter. He went in here and he cut down a ton of these trees, and these trees were toppled, freeing up other trees to grow up, the desired species like oaks and walnuts. And so all of these trees were folded across the aisles and across the lanes. And what we found out was that deer that we were hunting was living in this area. I was very convinced that he was living in this area, and now I know why. Because there was so much cover in here, not only from the tree planting, but from the toppled trees in the rows as they crossed over the rows and provided intense cover, even more so cover for the deer. Thirdly, the Cudde link system played a vital role in us killing this deer. We had Cudde links on the east side of this tree planting, we had Cudde links on the west side, and one on the south side as well. And so we did not ever have to step foot into this area. I'm not fortunate to live a mile away from this farm. I live an hour away from this farm. So the fact that the Cudde links can send me those pictures an hour away and I don't have to come and check them, and I don't have to actually walk into this area to manually check them, allowed this deer to stay in here undisturbed and really unharassed. And so he spent his entire time here going back from the east side, a little bit to the west, a little bit to the south, but making circles in this whole area. So when the time was right, we knew that he was in here the day before. We came and set up just on the west side of his core area, and sure enough, he came out of the tree planting, ended up walking right in front of us, and we put a 35-yard shot on that deer. That buck taught us three important lessons. Number one, if there's cover there, that's an incredibly important part. Number two, if you can do some TSI work and increase the habitat and increase the bedding area, deer will oftentimes find themselves staying in those areas like the split G3 did. And thirdly, if you don't have to go into that area to check your cameras and leaving it undisturbed, bucks will oftentimes stay in those areas and you'll have a better chance of killing those target bucks. So the Cudde link system was incredibly valuable to knowing what patterns the split G3 had and not being able to come in here and check cameras and disturb his core area.
Matt's hunt is a classic example of how making some small habitat improvements can really change the outcome of a season. And also, the Cudde link system is one that we've experimented with quite a bit over the past couple of seasons here at Midwest Whitetail, and he shows a perfect example of how you can put that to work to keep your impact to an absolute minimum. It's a good lesson for all of us. Okay, so I am experimenting with the T64 arrows during the off season this year. This is the the forward of center reverse tapered arrow. And they call it forward of center, FOC, which basically what that means is the balance point of the arrow is going to be a little bit further towards the front than it would be on a typical arrow. And that is supposed to create a better situation for penetration, better arrow flight, better stability. And you know, so far I've had good success with it. I've been really impressed. I mean, I was shooting the 5mm FMJs for the past several seasons. So I'm going to compare the 5mm FMJ to this T64 during the off season and just show you what I learned along the way. And also these are the bully vanes. This is brand new from Easton. They're a real durable, rugged, tough vane. They stick to this arrow shaft really well. So just a couple of equipment pieces to share with you. In this next segment, we're going to rejoin Josh Sparks and Caleb Greiner. A couple weeks ago, they talked about a spot that they're setting up for this coming season. They're going to go into a little bit more detail today.
Well, hey guys, today's March 13th, and as you can see, Caleb and I are back out on the farm. This is the farm that we've been hunting that half and half buck. That's one of the deer we introduced to you last week. As you can see behind me, we've got this black train, and this is the food plot we were talking about creating. We actually came in here a couple weeks ago, found this in the grass, and figured out that this is what we're gonna call it. So, kind of update you where we're at. We came in last week, burned it, and the burn went really well. Had a nice slow burn into the wind, made a good seed bed, and we got some clover frost seeded into that. Hasn't quite came up yet, but we can see it starting to germinate. And basically what we want to talk to you guys about today is why we decided to put this plot here and how we think it's going to help us kill that half and half buck this coming fall. The first thing that we're going to start with when Caleb and I were deciding where exactly to put this food plot was that we wanted to be able to access it whenever we had the most ideal conditions to kill a buck in October. And as most everybody knows, that's going to be your first big major cold fronts. And predominantly those are going to be accompanied by some sort of north wind, northwest. And when we looked at this spot using the map, that is perfect for access and, more importantly, you know, getting out of the tree stand when we're talking about this food plot. If you just think back to when Max and I were hunting those beans last season on the public, we saw that big 10-pointer. You know, that was October 3rd, I believe. We saw that buck. Grant and Jared saw TNT. Obviously that night, high pressure, north winds, good buck movement. So that was kind of the reason why we're worried about that. And what we'll be able to do is swing in, dump into this creek, and pop right up into the stand. We never have to step foot into the food plot. We never have to step foot into the timber surrounding it. None of the bedding is disturbed. So that was probably the most important thing. You know, we wanted to check off that we had good access and being able to hunt on good weather conditions. But, you know, like we had talked about, this creek bottom itself, we learned quite a bit, you know, the past few years, especially that 2017 hunt when we saw half and half. Wasn't that right?
Yeah, exactly. Looking back on 2017, we actually encountered quite a few deer that day, and one of the deer that we encountered was a stud 3-year-old, and he actually came from the draws that are out to the west and came right by the stand and wrapped around this creek bottom and eventually ended up exactly where we are. And if you look at the drone shot on this little food plot that we're starting to make, you can actually see the main trails going directly through the food plot and out to the ag fields to our south. And another point that I want to touch on is actually just 50 yards to the north here is actually what I call Scrape City. And every year there's probably 10, 20 scrapes that open up in this little acre patch. And the bucks, like I said, they move straight through that and they come straight through this plot. So what Josh and I are fixing up to do is actually extend this scrape plot and put a few scrape trees. And you guys will see that come later in the season and whatnot. If you look at all the trail cam photos on this farm of half and half, they are darn near all daylight pictures of that deer on scrapes in October. So Josh and I are really setting up to kill this deer in October, and putting that scrape line in here, I think that's going to be a definite key factor on killing that deer. Yeah,
I mean, it sounds pretty simple, and really it is. You know, we've identified good access. We identified a good, you know, geographical feature that's going to funnel deer. So next time that we'll be in here, we're going to try and bring a couple stands in, get this tree behind us cleaned up. Unfortunately, it's a locust tree, so So we're gonna have a bunch of trimming to do, but we'll get that tree cleaned up. We're gonna get some stuff in the plot cleared out. We gotta get stumps out. As you can see, we got some burn leftovers. And then the biggest project is actually something we didn't hit on. Where these deer funnel off of in this central timber, we're gonna do some TSI and clean up the bedding in there, but definitely excited. I mean, it was a lot of fun getting that burn going and just really starting the process for hopefully a story that's gonna end with this deer on the ground.
We've been doing these throwback hunts each week. The very first episode, we used a hunt from Mike Sawyer from the 2008 season, a deer that he killed in the middle of November, a buck that we'd call Stickers. And the dog's down here digging up moles. Good dog, Bentley. That deer was roughly 175 inches. And he came back again for the late season, and I think it was the 2nd of January 2009, so it would have been part of the 2008 season. And the buck that he killed was a real giant, and when the hunt is over, I'll break that down just a little bit more before I close.
Hey folks, welcome to Midwest Whitetail. We're back in what we've named Old Faithful here. This is the 3rd night in a row we've been in here. We shot 2 does the first night. I shot a doe last night, and Chris Mack, my cameraman, shot a real nice 9-pointer with the TC. So we're probably pushing the limit here, but we got the exact same wind we've had the last 2 nights, and we're going to see if we can tempt fate and continue to have some success here. So stick with us. I tell you, if you can't get excited about that, you're not a bow hunter. There he is, there he is.
Well, you know what, I'm a believer now. Bill's always talked about the late season being as good or even better than the rut. You know, largely because it gets so cold here in the Midwest, and these deer are just driven by their need to eat. And if you've got food sources, they get pretty predictable during this late season, and having the opportunity to hunt around that food and position yourself either right on the food or in between where they're coming or going from. And I'm starting to believe after what I saw this week.
I'm getting ready to see how these T64 arrows work for mole stabbers. Bentley is still digging away trying to find this mole. So let me get to Mike's hunt real quick and then I'll wrap up today. But that was a hunt that took place on a warm spell that came after several weeks of really, really cold. And I think we had about a quarter of an inch to a half an inch of ice in December, and it just kind of locked everything down. And the deer didn't have much to eat. It was bitter cold. And then we had this warm snap and the deer just went nuts. They were all over the place. In the course of 3 days, Mike and his cousin Chris Mack killed 5 deer, I think, from that one tree. The buck that Mike killed, Chris killed a buck there with a muzzleloader, and I think they killed 3 does. And that was all over the course of just 2 or 3 days. So they went nuts. So the key takeaway on that is there'll be a couple things here, but first is it's any weather front, any major weather change during the late season triggers movement. So if you had a long extended period of super cold weather, then you get a warm front, the deer will move. If you've had a longer period of warmer temperature, and then you get the cold front, the deer will move on that. So don't be only focused on cold fronts. Be looking for any severe or really noticeable significant change in temperature during the late season. Also, they were going to alfalfa, which most people wouldn't think of as a late season crop. So don't write alfalfa off the list when you're trying to figure out where the deer may be going during the late season. So that was another one of our great throwbacks. Don't know where we're going from here. We've got a bunch of them. So next week we'll have you another hopefully really fun hunt from the past. Well, that's it for this week. I appreciate you joining me. I got my whole yard to re-landscape here before the next episode. Mr. Bentley's helping me out, but I guess that's it for this week. We'll see you back here again next week for the next episode of Midwest Whitetail, and remember to always dream big.